Hello, I am Ruby Falconer. Today's date is Sunday, November 29th, 2020, and this is a Shamanic Egyptian Astrology update. I usually post these updates on Monday, but I decided to post this one on Sunday because tonight we have a full moon, and it's not just a full moon, it's an eclipse. It is a penumbral lunar eclipse in the sign Gemini on the 8th degree. Eclipses are important. They always come in pairs. Sometimes they come in threes. And they represent a type of a portal, a tunnel, a passageway, a birth canal between one phase of experience or another. And this one is particularly important because it represents the beginning of the end of the process that we've been going through all year, which I call the Great Shift Alignment. It will be the beginning of the end of the conjunction between the planets Pluto, Jupiter, and Saturn. The first eclipse portal that we had this year actually began last year, began on December 26th, 2019, and it ended on January 11th, 2020. And the next day, on January 12th, we had the exact Saturn-Pluto conjunction. And this whole year has been dominated by that energy. Saturn is Sobek, the old king. Pluto is Osiris, the Lord of regeneration. Saturn gives form to things. He constricts, he restricts, but he does that in order to give form, to kind of mold things into form. And so he was molding into form. He was making happen, giving form to a tremendous amount of transformation and change. In traditional astrology, Pluto is the Lord of death. He's the Lord of the underworld. Osiris is also, rules that realm, the realm of the underworld in the Egyptian myth. He's known as the Lord of regeneration because he dies not once but twice. So he dies, then he's reborn, then he dies again. And so he speaks to that internal birth, death, rebirth cycle that is so prominent here on planet Earth and that we all go through, and we've certainly been going through during this year, 2020. So those two energies came together for the first time. They've been playing with each other all through 2019, dancing with each other, but they came together in their one and only exact conjunction on January 12th. Since then, Jupiter, Horus, the principle of expansion, has caught up with them and has been dancing with them. So these three planets have been in a dance with each other all year long. And it's been in this sign Capricorn. Capricorn is Khnum, who is the creator of life. He's a creator god in the Egyptian myth who created the animals and the humans who live on the surface of the earth. And he does that by molding them out of clay. He puts them on his potter's wheel and he molds them. And what's most important about Khnum is anytime we go through a process of transformation and change, he puts us back on his wheel in order to reform us, to mold us once again so that we have a new Ka body. The Ka body is the energetic body to hold changes in substance. So that, the shadow side of Capricorn can be a kind of a sticking to the rules, sticking to the form no matter what, which can manifest in the world as authoritarianism or as autocratic behaviors. But Khnum is a very flexible elder, so to speak, in that he is always looking for a way to create a new form for us when we need it. And so he's been doing that all year long. Now, because Pluto's been involved, the god of death, and Saturn, and Jupiter is expanding the whole thing, it, of course, has not been an easy process. It's been a very difficult year. And that comes with the territory. As I've been saying all year long, this is about the dismantling of the structure of society and our own personal structure as well, our private structures, in order for something new to take its place. And so we've been through this constant dismantling process all year long, and we're coming to the end. We're very much coming to the end. Now, the period from January 11th through June 5th represented one portal, one phase of experience. We hit another portal, another passageway between two periods that took place from June 5th through July 4th. And during that period of time, we had 3 eclipses. We had 2 lunar eclipses and 1 solar eclipse, which took place on June 20th, very close to the solstice. And so it kind of, that eclipse period was around the solstice period in June. And so it set up a second phase of experience, which is coming to an end now, today. And so, that period that, the way I've been thinking of it and the way it appears to me is that the period that took place in the spring, if you live in the northern hemisphere, the autumn if you live in the southern hemisphere, and all of this can't help but have to do with the coronavirus and with all of the changes that has wrought. And certainly there's been a lot of other things going on. There have been awareness of systemic racism and injustice in our police forces. Capricorn rules the police. That there have been a need for change in those areas. The Black Lives Movement here in the United States and the reactions to it, and of course, in the United States we've had our election and everything that's all around that, and all of the campaigning that took place for most of the year around that. But all of it has been, the overriding piece has been the coronavirus, which has made everything different. Everything's been dismantled. And so here in the United States, at least, we had the first upsurge of coronavirus in the spring. And when I thought about it then, and looking back on it now, it has always seemed to me that even though, people could see that there were things that were happening that were going to truly change our world as we've known it, people were still kind of holding on, kind of a hope, in some cases an unconscious holding on to returning to life as it was, returning to normal, so to speak. What this second phase has been about, and that phase started on July 4th, which in the United States is Independence Day, and is completing itself today on November 29th, going into the 30th. What that has been about is understanding that there's no normal to return to, that we truly are going to have to create a new normal, and we don't know what that's going to be like because the process of the virus is not over yet. At least here in the United States, we're having a second upsurge, which is horrendous. It's in many ways much worse than the one in the spring, and that there are more cases, fewer deaths, thank goddess, but more cases and more strains on our society in many ways. And what's going on as we enter this full moon lunar eclipse tonight, and then when I say tonight, I'm talking about the United States, because this eclipse will take place in the early morning hours of November 30th, which is Monday. And for where I live on the East Coast, the eclipse will be exact at 4:30 a.m. And so it'll start around 2:30 a.m. and it'll complete itself around 6:30 a.m. If you live on the West Coast, it's going to be a bit earlier for you, start around 12:30 and end around 4:30. So you just have to kind of adjust depending on where you live, for this particular process. So, it would start around 11:30 tonight and end around 3:30 a.m. tomorrow morning and the 30th. So you just have to adjust depending on where you live. This particular eclipse is a penumbral eclipse, and penumbral eclipses are, it's the outer shadow of the earth is hiding the face of the moon, but not completely. So the moon is not blacked out like when we have a total lunar eclipse, but it's darkened. And this particular penumbral eclipse will be quite strong for these types of eclipses. Some of them, it's very hard to even tell that there is an eclipse because it's just like the moon's just a little darker, like a shading. But this one will be a bit more obvious, and it will cover about 83% of the moon. So if you have clear skies and if you're able to go out and see this eclipse, it'll be pretty clear, it'll be pretty obvious what's going on, while other penumbral eclipses less so. Certainly this one would be more powerful than the 2 penumbral eclipses that we had during the last portal, which was on June 5th and July 4th. This one will be stronger and more powerful and more obvious. So, what these eclipses represent is an ending of that phase of experience. And so we're going on now into an ending of a phase of experience that began on July 4th. And as we enter this eclipse, we still have the elements that have dominated this entire year prominent, and that's the alignment between Pluto, Jupiter, and Saturn. Now, Jupiter and Saturn are beginning to move away from Pluto. They're still conjunct. They're still pretty close. You know, they're within 5 degrees, but they're moving away. And, you know, those two planets in particular, Jupiter and Saturn, are closer to the sun, and so relative to us here on Earth, when we look out at them, they move quicker. And right now, excuse me, Jupiter and Saturn are putting on an amazing show. For me, again, where I live on the East Coast, if I go out after dark, you know, right when it gets dark, and look toward the south, I can see them. They're getting very close. I've been watching them for months now, getting closer and closer and closer, and now they're very close. And they're going to, over the next, between now and the 21st, they're going to get very close to one another. And, you know, their apparent position is the closest that they've been in 800 years. And thank you to Nicholas Wolf for sharing that article from Earth Sky with me that points that out. And this is their apparent position. They're not physically closer to each other. You know, they're you know, light years away from each other. And, you know, they remain very far, but they're from our position looking at them, and this has to do with the fact that orbits are not static. They're not always, you know, they don't always trace the same path along the plane of the ecliptic all the time. Sometimes they're what we call higher than the plane of the ecliptic, and sometimes they're lower. In this case, it happens that these two are very close to one another in terms of their apparent path to the plane of the ecliptic. And it's important to think in terms of apparent, because it's not what's really going on. But from our perception here on Earth, when we look at them, they look like they're really close to each other, and they're just going to keep getting closer over the next 3 weeks. So I really encourage folks, you know, if you're able to see Jupiter and Saturn in the southern hemisphere, they are apparent to you too, but it's much later at night. So for us in the United States, it's shortly after dusk. And for the folks that live in Australia, that part of the world, the southern part of the world, it's going to be later at night. And you can look that up online and find out when they're visible in your area. But I really encourage you to go out and see it, because this is a powerful conjunction. It's taking place in the sign Aquarius, and it's another piece that's suggesting that we are moving very rapidly into the age of Aquarius. And I've had a few people ask me if I think that this event is going to put us into the Aquarian age. And I have to say, not necessarily. It's my personal opinion, and you know, that's almost another talk that I can give another time. But it's my personal opinion. We've been tiptoeing into the age of Aquarius for a long time, really 250 years since the discovery of Uranus, which took place in 1784. But we have had progressively more and more events that have indicated that the elements of the age of Aquarius are getting stronger. I don't believe we're completely in it yet, because we have so much divisiveness taking place on our planet, which is a hallmark of the disintegration of the age of Pisces. So, you know, I think we're very much in that process of disintegration, of death of an old order, and we are seeing the birth of something new. But the thing about the process of birth is actually a death, and these two elements, these two dramatic elements of death and birth, take place simultaneously. And that's what's going on for us during this time. So we're in this very important period right now that starts tonight, November 30th in the United States, and will continue on over the next 2 weeks as we move through this portal. And one of the ways to think of this portal is it's like going into a tunnel. And when you go into the tunnel, you can't see the other side necessarily. It's long, it's dark. You're going into the darkness, and you have to go in on faith. And the idea is it's a little bit like a snake stripping off its skin. You're going to let go of the things that you do not want to take with you into, you know, when you emerge from the tunnel, into the new phase, into the new period, into the new life. And then just a week after that, we're going to have what will undoubtedly be an amazing conjunction, if you go out and look at it in the night sky, between Jupiter and Saturn. And that's a very powerful process of Jupiter, Horus, the young king, the principle of expansion, in an alignment with Saturn, Sobek, the old king, the principle of restriction. It has all of the elements, if you think about it, expansion and restriction happening simultaneously. It's like a kind of a eruption, a movement of something out. And it will be on the very first degree of Aquarius. It'll be at Aquarius 0 degrees, 28 minutes. And that will be the end of the Great Shift alignment. You know, at that point, Pluto will still be in Capricorn, 23 degrees of Capricorn. These two, Jupiter and Saturn, will be moving out of alignment with Pluto and moving out of alignment with each other, you know, as we move forward. So we'll be moving into a whole other phase. It's just going to bring us new experiences, and it will be time to start rebuilding our new normal, you know, time to start actually doing that, because what we have is gone. You know, it will be in tatters and shatters. So, you know, that's where we're at right now, and why I wanted to do this talk today rather than waiting till tomorrow. Because if you do live in an area where you can go out and see this eclipse, it's worth doing. And even if you don't, or if you have cloudy skies, which we may well where I live, it's important to know it's still happening. You know, it's still taking place. And just allowing oneself to feel into that energy, to feel into that vibration, and know that what's happening is an entryway into a portal that's going to take all of us somewhere else in our lives. And that we need to move into this portal with consciousness and also with trust. You know, that's the hard part. You know, when I looked at the chart for this lunar eclipse, we've got Pluto, you know, we've got the alignment of Pluto, Jupiter and Saturn still there, still in Capricorn. And Pluto specifically is in a square to Eris, who is the, Eris is her Roman name, is her Greek name. Discordia was her Roman name, and she is the goddess of strife and discord. And so, you know, the death and the dying and the strife is still there. It's starting to take on a different quality, but it's still there. We still have Jupiter and Saturn, Horus, and Sobek in alignment with Pluto, Osiris, very close to each other. They've moved a bit past a square to Eris, but they're still there. Mars sat in Aries has been coming closer now, is coming closer to a square to Pluto. And then will not square Jupiter and Saturn until next year when Mars moves into Taurus in January. So that's a ways off. But that when Mars does come into a square to Pluto, that's a kind of another sort of ending, another completion of this year-long process that we've all been undergoing. So it's a tremendous amount of energy that's going into this eclipse. We also have Neptune still stationary, Nephthys, keeper of the mysteries behind the veils. Neptune changed direction yesterday on Saturday, the 28th, and is still stationary. And so the veils are still very thick. You know, Neptune, Nephthys, is the Egyptian goddess of mystery and magic. Neptune is the planet that's associated with cosmic consciousness, spiritual awakening, imagination, illumination, intuition, and it's also confusion, illusion, delusion. So it's typical for Neptune to feel like things are drifting away. You know, we might feel like we're standing in quicksand, or we're walking through mud, or you get the metaphors here. You know, things are just dissolving away out from under our feet. We're in free fall. And we also feel the veils parting. We're being shown something that normally we do not see, that, you know, we have an opportunity to look behind the veils. So we're going to go on a journey, and what I would like to do is use a couple of elements here. You know, last week we did a journey with Nephthys, and I want to invite her back in as kind of the guardian or the guide for this particular journey, but we're particularly going to use the element that is most aligned with the sign Gemini in Shamanic Egyptian Astrology. This eclipse, this full moon, takes place in Gemini, the air sign, which is all about movement, the intellect, curiosity. I call it the hummingbird sign. It flits from thing to thing, not because it's fickle, not because it's changeable, although it can be those things, but because it intuitively knows when it has enough and when it's ready to move on. You know, Gemini is not a sign that's inclined to sort of stay with something for a really long time or to brood over it. You know, Gemini is a light and airy. It's kind of fairy energy, hummingbird energy. It's light and it likes to be on the move. It's happiest when it's able to do that. So I want to call that in. And in the Egyptian pantheon, Gemini is allied with the Sphinx. And when I say the Sphinx, I'm speaking specifically about the Great Sphinx of Giza, which is the very famous Egyptian sacred structure that is the body of a lion with the head of a pharaoh. And you know, that head of the pharaoh the head is really small compared to the body of the lion. I was privileged to see the Sphinx in 2017, and that's definitely true. It's kind of a little head, you know, big body. And you know, the thought is that the head of the pharaoh was carved on much later. Some pharaoh decided he wanted his face on the Sphinx, and so he had the animal head recarved. But there's also some indication that, and this particular structure, this particular statue, is much, much older than they originally thought it was. It goes back perhaps 14,000 years. And that it's may have been another animal entirely, that it may have been Anubis at one time rather than a lion, and that originally the Sphinx might have been built to create an alignment. It is an altar, as all sacred structures are. You know, when you build an altar in your home or outside, you are building a connector between heaven and earth. You are drawing down energies from source, divine source, from the great star nations, and disseminating it across the surface of the earth. That's the job of an altar. And it may be that when the Sphinx was originally created, it was designed to be an altar that connected with the constellation Orion and with the star Sirius, which is Canis Major. And that Anubis was chosen to represent that. And that as time went on, as the centuries went on, many centuries went on, it became in alignment with perhaps with another star, perhaps with Regulus, with the lion. And so it was shifted, it was changed in some way in order to reflect that particular alignment. And now it is out of alignment. You know, this is true of all of the structures that were built thousands of years ago that were perhaps designed to be in connection with a particular constellation or a particular star system. The stars do move. You know, all of our galaxy moves, but relative to the Earth, the stars move very slowly. You know, it's why the ancients called them the fixed stars, because they move very slowly. But in truth, they are not fixed. Everything in our universe moves, and the stars do too. But relative to our position here on Earth, they move extremely slowly. Basically, the stars move on average 1 degree out of 360 every 72 years. So that's a lifetime for many of us. That's extremely slowly. But they do move, and so they are out of alignment now with whatever the structures that have been built are out of alignment with whatever stars they might have originally been intended to connect with. So the concept that we're working with when we talk about the Sphinx in its connection with Gemini. You know, Geminis are often teachers and communicators, disseminators of information, inspiration. You know, a writer receives inspiration, a speaker receives inspiration, a teacher, and they offer it. It comes from source, it comes through them, and they put it out into the world. This is what happens with an altar. So we can think of people with Gemini energy, or when we are in a time with Gemini energy, that we are all being invited to be earth altars. And what that means, we're being invited to receive information from the great star nations, pass it through our body, and disseminate it in some way through the earth. And to add another element to this, and this is particularly important with the Sphinx, we're also meant to pull energy up from the earth itself, from Gaia, from her core, pass it through our body, and disseminate it to the great star nations. Gemini energy, the Sphinx energy, is about connection. It's about the connection between heaven and earth. And so with this particular lunar eclipse, we are all being invited to take that energy with us as we go into this portal, into this tunnel between the worlds. So I want to invite everyone to take a nice deep breath. To let go of distractions, to allow yourself to come present. And to use the breath. To use the breath to help you to settle in. To help you to let go of distractions. And I invite you to imagine that you are standing in front of one of the many sacred structures that are distributed around the planet. This may be a place that you have been. It may be one of the pyramids of Egypt or the Sphinx itself. It may be Machu Picchu, Stonehenge, Chaco Canyon, any number of places around the world. It may be a place that is not recognized by the tourist books as being a sacred structure, or by the anthropologists, but you knew when you got there that this was a sacred site. You could feel the vortex of energy. It may be a place that shows up in your imagination, and it may exist only there, in this time, in this place. But wherever it is, this is a place, and you can feel it as you come close to it. This place serves as a connecting rod between heaven and earth. It connects the heart, the soul, the core of Gaia with her brothers and sisters, the great star nations. It sends up information from her to them, and it receives from source, from divine source, from the great star nations. It receives information that it passes to her. And so I invite you to come close to this place, this structure, and find a place where you can put the palms of your hands up against it. And as you do, you immediately feel its energy. You feel its power, its strength. And you feel yourself taken into it, so that you become one with this amazing structure. And it awakens within you your own ability to be a connecting rod between heaven and earth, to be an earth altar, to receive and transmit both from Gaia, from the earth, as well as from the stars above and divine source. You feel the energy coursing through your body, through the palms of your hands and the soles of your feet. You feel the connection. And you become aware now of the presence of Nephthys, keeper of the mysteries behind the veils. She stands with you and she asks you if you are ready to enter the portal between the worlds. And she is here to open the curtain, to reveal to you what is behind the veils. And when she does, you see that you are standing in front of a tunnel, and that it extends ahead of you into the distance, and you cannot see its end. But you understand, you know that there is an end. And that it is your job to enter this portal. It will be your task over the next 2 weeks to move through this portal. It is not time to enter yet. It is not time to move through yet. This is the time when you commit. This is the time when you step over the separation between what you have known over the last 5 months and what is yet to be, that which is not yet revealed. And in order to do this, you have to be willing to trust. You have to trust that you will be guided, that there will be a small, still voice within you that will call to you out of the darkness. And that intuitively you will know what to leave behind and what to take with you. I'm going to be quiet now for a couple of minutes and let you connect with the energy of this portal and your willingness to enter into it, to make the journey through this passageway, this portal between the worlds, and move into a new phase, a new life, a new way of being in the world. Nice deep breath. Go on a little journey, a vision of your commitment. you become aware that you have been joined by Isis, twin sister of Nephthys, Queen Mother of Heaven, she who is with us through every process of transformation and change. And she will be with us as we move through this portal. The two sisters, the twins, Isis and Nephthys, will both be with us. They will both be our guides. We will not be alone. Isis wraps her rainbow wings around you. And I invite you to lie back in her arms. Feeling her love and her care, her compassion. And feel yourself at one with your sacred structure, your sacred site. Feeling yourself as the earth altar that you are at the beginning of this journey, this passage through the portal, which will take the next 2 weeks. You will emerge from this portal on December 14th with a total solar eclipse in Sagittarius. But this is the beginning of the shedding of a skin that you've worn all this year. And it's time to release it, time to let it go. Feel yourself held. Feel yourself protected. And make the commitment to receive and transmit. We walk this path not just for ourselves, but for our entire planet and everyone upon it. Nice deep breath. Come gently back into the room. Thank you. We will talk again.